He said I was too fragile to handle his past. Then he told me the number. 47. The word didn't just fall, it detonated. The air in our apartment shifted like the second before glass shatters. But that came later. That morning began with the smell of coffee and pancakes and the soft hum of a city that hadn't yet woken up. Sundays were our ritual. No alarms, no deadlines, just quiet. I always thought peace was proof of love. Turns out it can also be the silence before it dies. Robert was curled up on the couch legs, stretched eyes glued to his phone. He'd been scrolling for an hour, thumb flicking through whatever world existed inside that little glowing screen. I tried to ignore the tension radiating off him, the way his jaw tightened every time I spoke lately. I wanted to believe it was work stress, or maybe he was just tired. Anything but what it really was. "Breakfast ready," I said, setting the plates on the table. He didn't look up, just murmured something that sounded like thanks without moving his lips. I smiled anyway. I'd learned that relationships often survive on tiny acts of pretending. I poured syrup over his pancakes, placed the fork just so he liked it on the right, not the left. These small details had always felt like love to me. Familiarity, ritual care. He finally spoke. "Miranda's birthday's next weekend. She's doing it at the Vanguard." I froze mid-pour. The Vanguard. An overpriced club where people shouted over bad music and called it networking. "Do we have to?" I asked gently, trying to keep it light. "We've been saving for the new place, and you know that place charges for breathing." He looked up, his eyes flat. "It's her birthday. We can't just not go." I didn't say we shouldn't go. I just thought, there it is again. He cut me off, setting his phone down with a sharp click. That word. Thought. "What?" "You always have to overthink everything. You can't just live Betty. You need everything to make sense to be safe." His tone carried a blade under it. I blinked, taken aback. "I'm not trying to control anything. I'm just saying maybe we should be practical." Practical. He spat the word like it tasted sour. "You say it like a prayer, like if you're cautious enough, life will owe you peace. But it doesn't work that way. You play life on the easiest difficulty and call it wisdom." Something inside me recoiled. I set down my coffee slowly, my hands suddenly cold. Where is this coming from? He laughed, a single dry sound. "You wouldn't understand. You never do." I could have walked away, then ended the conversation, but some part of me, stubborn, hopeful, maybe desperate, wanted to bridge the gap. "Robert, I'm not trying to fight. I just want to know what's wrong." He looked at me, then really looked, and the gaze was unfamiliar, hard, tired, mean. "What's wrong," he said slowly, "is that you're boring, Betty. Predictable. Safe. You make everything so small, so contained. I can't breathe in here sometimes." My throat tightened. I didn't know being stable was a crime. Stable. His lips twisted into a smirk. "You think stability's attractive? You think men want someone who plans, who saves, who never takes a risk?" He leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper that stung worse than a shout. "You're not woman enough to handle a man who's lived." The words hit me like cold water. "What did you just say?" He leaned back, crossing his arms. His confidence grew in proportion to my silence. "You heard me." I tried to laugh, but it came out thin, trembling. "And what exactly makes you so worldly, Robert?" He smirked. "Experience. Experience." His eyes glittered. 47. 47. What? He smiled wider, like he'd been waiting for me to ask. "Women. Before you." My mind went blank. He said it like a victory, like a badge of honor. "I've lived," he said. "I've seen things, done things. I've been with women who had real passion. You're just this." His hand gestured toward the table, the pancakes, the apartment, the quiet life we'd built. The sound in the room changed. Even the clock seemed to hesitate. "This," he repeated softer this time, as if explaining a simple fact. "You're the calm after the storm, the stopgap, the one men settle for when they're done living." I couldn't breathe. It wasn't the number that hurt, it was the tone, the pride, the way he wanted me to feel small. "I'm sorry you see it that way," I said quietly. "I thought we were building something real." He laughed again, a low, cruel sound. "Real. This isn't real. This is retirement." For a long moment, neither of us moved. The sunlight fell across his face, harsh and unkind. Something inside me snapped, not with noise, but with silence. The kind of silence that ends things. I stood up, my body calm, almost mechanical. I looked around at the apartment, the framed photo from our trip to Bali, the books we'd picked together, the mug he'd bought me that said, "Good morning, sunshine." Every item suddenly looked like evidence from someone else's life. He was still talking something about me being sensitive, emotional, insecure, but his voice faded into the distance. Because in that moment, clarity arrived like cold light. He didn't want love, he wanted an audience. And I was done watching the show. The pancakes were still steaming when I turned and walked toward the bedroom. I didn't slam the door, I didn't even speak. But I think he heard something anyway, the sound of something breaking that can't ever be fixed. The silence after his words didn't fade, it deepened. It thickened until it became something you could almost touch like fog made of grief. Robert's voice followed me down the hallway, laced with disbelief. Betty, where are you going? You're seriously walking away because of that. I didn't answer. My steps were steady, my pulse wasn't. Inside, everything was trembling, but on the outside, I was eerily calm. The bedroom looked different now. It wasn't ours anymore. It was a set, the scene of something that had already ended. I reached for the top shelf of the closet, pulling down my old forest green duffel bag. It landed on the bed with a dull thump. I hadn't used it since a trip with my sister 3 years ago. Funny how objects wait silently for the day they become symbols. I unzipped it. The sound cut through the quiet like a blade. Fold, jeans, fold, sweater, fold. My hands were moving on autopilot. Each piece of fabric I packed felt like a piece of myself reclaimed. Behind me, I could hear him pacing in the living room, still talking not to comfort, but to control. You're overreacting. It was just a number, Betty. It's the past. Why can't you handle that? I didn't answer. The only sound from me was the whisper of folded fabric and the rustle of drawers. He tried again, louder this time. You always do this, get in your head and make everything dramatic. I tell you something honest and suddenly I'm the villain. Oh, yeah. Still nothing. When he realized the silence wasn't just anger, it was absence, his tone shifted. The arrogance cracked panic bleeding through. Betty, come on, don't be like this. We can talk, okay? You're not really leaving. I zipped one side of the duffel shut and went to the dresser. The perfume he'd bought me, because it smells expensive, stayed behind. I packed the one I'd worn before I met him. Lavender and rain. My scent. My past. I could feel him watching me from the doorway now. The air around him was nervous, restless. Betty, he said softly, you're seriously that insecure? That word again. I finally turned, meeting his eyes. My voice was quiet even. No, Robert. I'm not insecure. I'm just done. He blinked, like the concept was foreign to him. Done. What does that even mean? It means I've finally stopped mistaking your cruelty for honesty. I walked past him, my bag slung over my shoulder. He moved to block the door. Arms spread wide like a parody of desperation. You're being ridiculous. I didn't mean it like that. Then why did you say it? I asked, calm as a surgeon. Because you make me feel he stopped searching for words, for excuses, for something that could twist this back into my fault. Small, he finished finally. You make me feel small with your rules, your control, your quietness. The irony almost made me laugh. Then I guess we're even, I said. I reached for the door handle. He didn't move. His eyes flicked between my face and the bag, as if one of them might suddenly vanish. You're really doing this? Yes. You'll regret it. No, I said softly. I'll remember it. And that's worse for you. He flinched. I pushed past him, the edge of my shoulder, brushing his chest. It felt like crossing a border. In the living room, the half-eaten pancakes had gone cold. The coffee smelled bitter now. I paused for just a second, my eyes catching on the photo frame on the shelf. The two of us at the beach, sunburned, laughing. For a moment, my heart tried to reach back. Then I saw his reflection in the glass arms, crossed lips tight, and that moment died. I picked up my keys. Fine, he snapped. Go. Walk out. You always act like you're so above it all, but you're just scared. You can't handle a real man. I turned to him, my expression empty. Maybe I just don't need one. The hallway outside was cool and quiet. I could hear a neighbor's TV faintly through the walls, a commercial jingle about something meaningless. It was grounding, ordinary, human. The door closed behind me with a soft click. Not a slam, just finality. For a second, I stood there, hand still on the handle, waiting for the guilt to come. It didn't. Just a stillness, sharp and strange, like breathing in after crying too long. I walked down the corridor, my footsteps echoing softly. Each step away from that apartment felt like a page turning. By the time I reached the street, the morning light had shifted. The city was waking up. People laughed. Cars honked. Somewhere life continued indifferent and vast. I looked up at the sky and whispered to no one, "It's over." And for the first time in years, it really was. The first few days after I left were nothing but static, the kind of silence that hums inside your bones. I crashed at my friend Maya's apartment. The kind of friend who doesn't ask what happened, but leaves a blanket on the couch and a cup of tea beside you like she already knows. Her place smelled of peppermint and paint thinner, chaotic, and alive. I hadn't realized how sterile my old apartment had been until now. The duffel bag sat in the corner, half open like a wound that hadn't scabbed yet. I didn't cry, not even once. People think tears mean heartbreak, but sometimes the hurt is too clean for that. Sometimes the pain cauterizes itself. Robert's words looped in my head for days. Not the insults, not even "you're not woman enough." It was the number. 47. He'd said it like a trophy count. I kept asking myself, what kind of person measures their worth that way? By the third night, I blocked his number, his socials, every trace of him that lived in pixels. It wasn't an act of revenge. It was surgery. Digital amputation. Maya noticed me scrolling through my contacts one evening, thumb hovering over his name. "Don't," she said, gently painting her nails without looking up. I wasn't going to. I lied. She smirked. "Good. He doesn't deserve your attention, even in pretend." She was right. But still, in the quiet hours of the night, the echo of his voice found me. "You'll regret it." Maybe part of me feared he'd be right. Maybe that's what healing is, the long process of proving someone wrong who doesn't even deserve the proof. The first text came 3 days later. Unknown number. But I knew. Unknown Betty. "I'm sorry. I was angry and said something stupid. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. My heart didn't race. It just ticked like a clock, reminding me what time it was. He wasn't apologizing. He was rewriting, turning the knife into a misunderstanding, trying to paint my boundary as hysteria. I deleted it, blocked the number. 2 days later, another number, another message. Unknown. "Okay, fine. I get it. You're hurt. But walking out like that, that's pathetic, Betty. You always make everything a drama." Pathetic. That word again, the one he used to make me shrink. Except now it just hung in the air, meaningless. I could almost see the panic behind it. I didn't delete that one immediately. I saved it. Like evidence. A reminder of who I was walking away from. A week passed. I started going to the gym again. My body had forgotten what strength felt like. Each press, each stretch, felt like reclaiming a piece of ground that had been occupied for too long. Work helped too. I threw myself into deadlines, reports, late nights. I could focus there. Numbers and projects didn't lie to you. Then came another text. Unknown. "I can't stop thinking about you. It was just a number. Those girls meant nothing. You're the only one who mattered. Please, I love you." I laughed out loud, not cruelly, just wearily. The pattern was too familiar. Insult, guilt, affection, desperation. The cycle of emotional gravity pulling me back in. I didn't reply. Silence was my message. That night, I went to the balcony of Maya's apartment. The city stretched below, windows glowing like small universes, each one holding a life, a story, someone else's chaos. Mine felt suddenly small, manageable. I realized something. Robert wasn't a villain. He was an emptiness, wearing a confident smile. And I had mistaken that emptiness for depth, because it echoed my own insecurities. Maya joined me, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "You look peaceful," she said. "I think I am," I replied. "It's strange." Peace always feels strange when you've been surviving chaos. We stood there for a long moment, the wind carrying the distant sound of a siren, the city humming beneath us. When I went back inside, I took out my phone one last time, not to check for messages, but to erase him completely. No more old photos, no chat history, not even his name in my contact list. It took 3 seconds, then my screen went blank. The weight that left my chest was immediate. Maya looked up from her book. "Finally deleted him." I nodded. Every molecule. She smiled. "Good. Make room for someone better." "Maybe just room for myself," I said quietly. That night I slept. Really slept. The first dreamless sleep in months. And when morning came, I woke not to the sound of his voice or my phone vibrating, but to the sound of rain against the window. The city smelled clean. My mind did too. A month later, I saw him again. It wasn't planned. I was sitting in a cafe near my new office, sipping cappuccino and highlighting sections of a client proposal when the air changed a faint electric pull that made my stomach twist. I looked up. Robert. He was standing by the door, scanning the room. He looked smaller than I remembered, thinner, his posture slightly caved. His once sharp confidence had softened into something brittle. For a second, I thought about pretending not to see him, but he spotted me before I could decide. Our eyes met. His expression flickered surprise, then relief, then something like fear. He walked over. Betty, he said, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. Wow, you look good. The words felt rehearsed, like a man trying to remember how charm works. I nodded, polite but distant. Robert. He hesitated. Can I sit? I'd rather you didn't. He sat anyway. The audacity was almost nostalgic. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He stared at his hands, fidgeting with his phone. I studied the steam rising from my coffee. It felt like watching a ghost, familiar but hollow. Finally, he exhaled. I've been awful. I said nothing. He ran a hand through his hair, which was overgrown and dull now. I don't even know what I was trying to prove that day. I was showing off, I guess. Trying to sound impressive. I met his eyes. 47 is not impressive, Robert. It's just sad math. He flinched. You always did know how to cut through me. I didn't smile. No, I just learned to stop pretending. He leaned forward, his voice soft. Betty, I was stupid. I thought if I acted like I didn't care, it made me stronger. But it didn't. It made me cruel. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I see that now. Tears gathered in his eyes. For a second, just a second, my old instinct kicked in. The urge to comfort, to fix, to absorb someone else's pain like it was mine to carry. But then I remembered how that instinct had been used against me. I stayed silent. He reached for my hand across the table. I pulled mine back before he touched me. His face crumpled. So that's it, he whispered. After everything? Yes, I said simply. He blinked hard. You can't just erase 2 years. I'm not erasing them, I said. I'm learning from them. His eyes darkened. The shift was quick pity turning to resentment. You're cold, you know that. You act like you're some enlightened saint, but you're just scared to feel anything real. I tilted my head. That's interesting. You confuse boundaries with coldness. That's why we never worked. He stared at me like he didn't understand the language I was speaking. The silence stretched. The cafe was filled with the clatter of cups and low murmurs of strangers, ordinary life going on around us. He finally laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. You'll end up alone, Betty. You think walking away makes you strong, but it just makes you lonely. I stood gathering my notebook and coffee. Lonely is better than small. He froze, eyes wide. I placed a few bills on the table for my drink. Take care of yourself, Robert. When I turned to leave, he called after me, his voice low and cracking. You're not even angry. I looked over my shoulder. No, that's what scares you, isn't it? The cafe door closed behind me. The city greeted me with a rush of sound cars' voices whined, all alive, all moving forward. My reflection appeared faintly in the glass door as I walked away calm, grounded, someone I barely recognized, but finally respected. Inside, Robert was just a blur of motion, a man left talking to his own echoes. For a long time, I used to believe closure came from apologies. But as I walked down that street, the truth was crystal clear. Closure comes from indifference. And mine was absolute. The weeks after that cafe encounter unfolded like sunlight through a window after a long storm. Not all at once, just enough to remind me that warmth still existed. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of the city. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. I filled it with soft, light, secondhand furniture and the kind of quiet that didn't feel empty anymore. Every corner reflected freedom, not the loud, rebellious kind, but the quiet certainty that comes from having no one left to explain yourself to. The first few nights I slept with the window open. The city hum beneath me became a lullaby. For months I had been braced for impact. Now I could finally exhale. Work began to bloom again, too. Projects that had once felt tedious now felt like proof of competence, of control. I wasn't healing, I was rebuilding. And then somewhere between grocery runs and late-night editing, I met Nathan. He wasn't dazzling. Not the kind of man who fills a room, more the kind who listens when you speak. A soft-spoken designer who found beauty in small things, color gradients, old records, stray cats that linger near his studio. Our first conversation was about a spilled latte and a shared laugh over how fragile good moods can be before caffeine. There was no spark of obsession, no thunderclap, just ease. We started seeing each other, slowly, lunches, walks, movies. He never asked about Robert, and I never offered. There was a safety in that silence. A mutual understanding that peace doesn't need an origin story. One evening, about 2 months after I'd left Robert, I got a small reminder of the past I thought I'd buried. An envelope, forwarded from my old address. Inside, a few stray bills, a postcard from a friend, and one thin slip of paper, a flyer for a club event. The Vanguard. The name alone made me laugh, but not bitterly this time, just with mild disbelief at how much power one word used to have over me. Still, it was a loose end, and I didn't like loose ends, so I decided to close it cleanly. I unblocked Robert's number for the first time in months and sent a short neutral message. Me hi. Please forward any remaining mail to the address below. This will be my final message. I added the details and hit send. Then I reblocked him. Administrative, clinical, over. Or so I thought. Less than a minute later, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I didn't need to check. My gut knew. I answered. At first, nothing. Just breathing uneven shallow. Then a broken whisper. You win. It was Robert. His voice was stripped of its usual armor, no arrogance, no edge. Just exhaustion. Robert, I said quietly. Okay, he continued, voice cracking. You win, Betty. I'm nothing without you. I can't sleep. I can't think. I've tried to move on, but the girls, they don't get it. They think I'm dramatic. My family just looks at me like I'm a failure. I said nothing. The silence on my end stretched long enough that he began to fill it. I ruined it, didn't I? He muttered. All of it. The women before you, they didn't mean anything. They were just noise. You were the only one who ever made me feel real. My throat tightened, not with sympathy, but with clarity. Then why did you destroy it? I asked softly. I don't know, he said. Because I'm broken. Because I thought power meant control. You used pain as proof of strength, I replied. You confused dominance with depth. He started crying, then the kind of sob that comes from realizing you've run out of performances. Tell me what to do, he begged. I'll go to therapy, I'll change. Just don't hang up. Don't leave me in this silence. I took a slow breath, my voice calm even. Robert, this isn't about winning or losing. It never was. Then what is it about? It's about cause and effect. About what happens when someone mistakes cruelty for confidence. I didn't mean it like that. It doesn't matter what you meant, I interrupted gently. It matters what you did. He went quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like a confession. You called me insecure, I continued, but I walked away because I finally respected myself. You called me cold, but I was just done freezing for someone else's warmth. I could hear him breathing, shallow and unsteady. You don't mean that, he said, his voice breaking. You still care. I used to, I admitted, but caring stopped being love when it started feeling like survival. Another pause, then a whisper. You don't forgive me. I don't need to, I said. Forgiveness is for people still holding on. I'm not. The silence that followed was long, heavy. Then quietly I added, take care of yourself, Robert. And I hung up. I didn't block the number this time. I didn't need to. Some connections die on their own once they run out of power. I set the phone down on the windowsill. Outside, the city was bathed in amber light. Down below, I saw Nathan walking toward the building, a paper bag of takeout in his hand, a small smile on his face when he spotted me through the glass. I smiled back. And for the first time, I didn't feel haunted. The ghosts were still there, faint outlines of what used to hurt, but they no longer reached for me. Because ghosts only linger in places where they're fed, and I was finally starving them.